Today's important lesson is primarily about taking this valuable opportunity to talk to everyone present about some of the intricate and often subtle boundaries that exist between worldly, temporal matters and profound, transcendental matters, and how to properly grasp these important boundaries. The main point is that in the past, there was a particularly revered and influential great master in Tibetan Buddhism who talked with great wisdom about how to conduct oneself and get along with others, and gave profound and practical teachings on these essential life principles and social etiquette. Today, I will briefly share some of this with you. If there are materials available in the future, I can also provide them. Mainly, in Tibetan Buddhism, the focus is actually on transcendental teachings and practices that lead to spiritual liberation. For example, practicing the deeply meaningful teachings on emptiness, cultivating bodhicitta, and developing the mind of renunciation with sincere dedication and wisdom. There are especially profound instructions in these particular areas. Indeed, the ultimate and true benefit of Buddhism is not to obtain fleeting fame, temporary happiness, material wealth, physical health, or even worldly peace. That is not the primary goal. Its ultimate purpose is, in fact, actually to attain liberation for oneself and to help all sentient beings achieve liberation. Before reaching such a very significant state, the profound and ancient teachings of Buddhism are actually not, as some people in the modern world now mistakenly believe, a rigid dogma or a simple set of rules about completely and blindly abandoning all worldly matters, not accumulating any significant wealth at all, not actively pursuing fame or recognition, or completely disregarding emotions and feelings altogether. It's not about completely ignoring all worldly activities or responsibilities. It's not like that at all, in any way. In fact, from the traditional and comprehensive Buddhist point of view, we actually have a very thorough and detailed analysis of worldly matters that affects our daily lives according to ancient scriptural teachings, such as family, social relationships, ethics, finance, and so on. And if we study in this way, it will be extremely helpful for our lives and for our journey as human beings. It can be of great benefit to us. Indeed, in our everyday lives, many of our pains and joys, some are unavoidable for us, the result of karmic forces from previous lives manifesting. These are inevitable. But there is another part, which we call imputed, parikalpita. Imputed means something that is considered to be established or attributed based on what others have stated or reported. It's not something that truly and objectively exists, but because you have a deeply ingrained and habitual way of valuing things, this established habitual value system is very difficult to fundamentally break through or alter. There is quite a significant amount of this particular kind of suffering that we experience in our daily lives as well. Some of it, indeed, like when I am truly hungry, that is a very real kind of suffering. Or when the body is sick or has cancer, that is also a real kind of suffering. But there are some things that frequently arise as a direct consequence of our inherent process of competition. And additionally, some of these challenges originate from deeply unfulfilled desires residing within ourselves. If we are not addicted to them, it's completely fine. But we just can't let it go. Especially in today's fast-paced and information-saturated era, many people see and hear a lot through various media channels. As a result, when they can't fulfill their wishes, the suffering that they experience only continues to increase. So, at times like this, it is really necessary and important for us to use some Buddhist perspectives to evaluate ourselves. It might become very clear and profoundly insightful. So today I'm going to share with you some profound and timeless teachings from certain great masters who offer valuable wisdom and guidance, and also offer you a comprehensive and detailed analysis of their general meaning and broader significance. I'll also add some of my own perspectives. In other words, these kinds of teachings are often not given much consideration by young people in contemporary society. These teachings are from some respected elders and truly wise masters, with their accumulated knowledge and experience. They instruct the next generation, passing on valuable insights and guidance, or instruct these younger people by diligently following various established worldly principles and profound teachings, and subsequently offer some valuable and insightful advice to those who seek it. In this way, it might be very helpful for these confused and struggling young people who are seeking life guidance as they navigate life's challenges in their personal journey. So what are the main aspects that we should truly consider? First, the very first and most crucial point we need to consider is about having an upright heart. In today's modern society, many of us, unfortunately, some people say, being straightforward is great. But some people think you shouldn't be too straightforward. This issue is actually quite common and frequently encountered. If our hearts are truly upright and kind in their intentions, then of course that is indeed a very good and commendable quality. But if you're too upright, and perhaps overly so, especially in this degenerate age of materialism and declining spiritual values, it seems that people don't really value you that much. It's like how a beggar's monkey is often teased and ridiculed without compassion or understanding by others. In the same way, at any time, what kind of balance should we maintain in different social situations? Should we be upright or not? This kind of balance is very important and holds significant value. That is to say, whenever we undertake any action, if we are too rigidly upright, we might inadvertently end up hurting a considerable number of people. If we are too dishonest or cunning, or if we always speak in a roundabout, indirect way, then when we do endeavor to accomplish anything, it will also be very hard to accomplish. Especially if some foolish people are too excessively upright, they can still inadvertently hurt a significant number of people, causing considerable harm. The Sakya aphorisms also profoundly state that a foolish and simple person can inadvertently bring harm upon himself and others around him. A straight tree standing prominently in the forest is often the very first to be cut down, and similarly, a straight arrow is precisely the one that wounds. This means that especially those individuals who are foolishly upright, whether this manifests in their straightforward speech or their direct actions, are particularly vulnerable. They may end up hurting themselves and others, often causing harm to people. It's just like in a vast forest, where among the many trees, some particular ones are especially straight and remarkably upright. When people need to make stakes for various purposes or fashion different objects, those straight and easily accessible trees are the simplest to cut down. So generally, when experienced woodcutters enter the forest, when they enter into the forest, what do they like the most? They like the straight trees the most. These can be used as sturdy pillars or strong beams for houses. Any straight tree can be utilized for all sorts of purposes. Arrows are also very straight. Because arrows are straight, they are ideal for their intended use. They often end up inadvertently hurting others. What does this metaphor truly illustrate? Sometimes being overly upright can indeed hurt others, and regrettably, also oneself. Right spiraling conch shells are widely considered exceptionally auspicious. This is from the Sakya aphorisms. I don't quite remember the rest clearly. The meaning is that being too upright can harm others and oneself. Sometimes a right spiraling conch shell has a lot of twists and turns. However, people universally regard it as an auspicious symbol. Therefore, sometimes, especially in this modern era, it is essential that we, as Buddhists, strive to be upright and steadfast when it is most appropriate and beneficial. When not right time upright, there's no need to be overly blunt or straightforward. Some people nowadays say, I'm a very straightforward person, I speak very directly. But they don't seem to comprehend at all the specific kind of environment we currently find ourselves in, or the particular types of individuals who are present around us. If they choose to speak publicly and end up hurting or provoking many people, then it's quite possible that this person, no matter what they choose to do in the future, will inevitably suffer certain setbacks in various aspects of their life, and will ultimately end up being harmed themselves to some considerable extent. They might even be completely rejected by society. This is a very real possibility. Nowadays, some young people, unfortunately, because they lack social experience, when they enter a company or a group, they often speak very bluntly and directly. They firmly insist on telling it exactly like it is, and frequently claim to focus solely on the matter at hand, not the person involved. They articulate everything directly, without any discernible filter whatsoever, expressing their thoughts openly and without reservation. In the end, this ultimately leaves them with any room to survive. So nowadays, some young people find that their interpersonal relationships in society are not particularly ideal. Ultimately, they just can't fit in with others, so they choose to do something like open an online shop by themselves as a means of independent financial survival, because in society they simply can't get along with others or collaborate successfully. I'm not saying that everyone who opens an online shop has a bad personality. That's not what I mean. But there are indeed many people who just can't face society or adapt comfortably. They don't have the courage. They don't want to interact with others. This even includes some of us who practice spiritual cultivation. Maybe they just can't stand certain things. Whenever they see other people, they feel uncomfortable inside. In the end, they just close the door and stay inside all the time. Maybe their spiritual practice isn't even going that well. They're like marmots, unwilling to see anyone at all. This could also be a significant phenomenon in society. So sometimes being too blunt and direct isn't necessarily a good thing either, you know. At certain specific times, you might really need to be quite straightforward and direct. But at certain crucial times, especially when you are speaking and addressing these particular groups, who are all extremely cunning, deceptive, and sly in their intentions, within such gatherings, if you speak with complete honesty, it might not necessarily yield the best results. This also depends on your own observation and interpretation of specific circumstances. That's one aspect of it. Now, when it comes to the art of speaking, generally speaking, some individuals are very eloquent, possessing a remarkable ability to articulate their thoughts and ideas with clarity and impact, making them highly effective communicators. They are articulate and have outstanding speaking skills. Of course, that is indeed a very good and positive development. But if, at any given time and in any particular place, there are circumstances that arise, you seem to speak without restraint, talking endlessly, and you boast about everything, just talking, and then it's very likely that everything inside you will be completely exposed to others, leaving no secrets and revealing your vulnerabilities. You laid out entirely and completely in front of them clearly. In fact, that's actually not very good either. So at all times, you need to know the proper measure when speaking. I notice that some of us really don't like to talk much at all, preferring meaningful silence and practicing thoughtful communication. They keep their mouths tightly shut, no matter what the topic is. Among us Tibetans, there's a saying that someone is like a mute person. And even if you tried to dig words out of their mouth with a hoe, you wouldn't get a single word out despite your most persistent efforts. They're just tight-lipped as hell in any social situation. There's also another saying that their mouth is like it's filled with stones, so they just can't speak, like a mute person. That's not very good either. But then there are some people who are always talking, even when no one asks them or says anything to them. One moment they're talking about someone else's faults. The next moment they're talking about someone else's virtues. They go on about everything happening in the world, talking endlessly, never stopping. Even among us Buddhists, there are people like this. In the end, the people around them get really annoyed. A lot of people don't want to associate with them because they talk too much and are extremely long-winded. People like this, actually, when they're talking, others nearby are laughing at you, and some people really dislike you because you just keep talking without any awareness or consideration, even when nobody seems interested in what you are talking. In fact, this particular kind of talking is often referred to in the world as running your mouth without hitting the brakes. The more words you speak, the more mistakes you are likely to make. If you talk too much, it can indeed bring about a significant amount of trouble. Truly, disaster often originates from the mouth. There are many meaningful things and meaningless things that people feel the need to say out loud. I know some very interesting lamas, and sometimes, to be completely honest, I'm actually quite afraid of them, especially when they are in a large group, because they're always nearby. And even when no one asks them anything, they just keep on truly talking, non-stop. Some things get repeated over and over again, just constantly being said. Honestly, this kind of behavior isn't very beneficial. Back when the revered Guru Padmasambhava left Tibetan area, some of his profound teachings also explicitly mentioned this, specifically in some of the special and detailed instructions he gave to the king and ministers. When it's not necessary, it's best to speak as little as possible. Less is better, because sometimes, let's be honest, most of our grudges and conflicts also arise because of words. Mifam Rinpoche, in his Advice to Kings, nailed this point, and specifically wrote a section called On Speech. In this section on speech, it clearly says that when it is absolutely necessary, we must indeed speak up. Because if you do not say certain important things, the truth will never be known, so you have to speak out. But when it's truly not necessary, you really shouldn't say it. You should also know the clear boundaries between what should and what shouldn't be said. You need to master this yourself. Of course, this requires skill in speaking. You also need to know how to speak and whether it's necessary to say something or not. Just think twice before you speak and save some trouble. Don't be that person who talks too much. Get it right? You should analyze this with your own wisdom. I think for us in this modern day and age, some people do not reflect upon themselves at all, which is quite unfortunate. They speak too little. For people like this, I suggest increasing your speech a bit. It would be good to take in some language and keep it firmly in your mind, allowing it to be a part of your communication. When it's necessary, you can simply open your mouth and say a few words, and that is fine. Some individuals always have their language switch on. Their linguistic switch is always in on position, indicating a constant readiness to express themselves. In such cases, it's better to tighten it when it's not necessary. When it's not necessary, tightening it is the better choice. It's best to only turn it on when it's needed. That might be better. Everyone should, ideally, observe themselves and think twice before opening their mouth. That day, in the 7 points of mind training, what did we talk about? The two witnesses, take the main one, right? Among the two ways of bearing witness, you yourself should be the most clear about yourself. Staying in that middle lane is totally the best move. It's absolutely the smartest choice. So you need to see for yourself whether you should speak or not. No one else can truly give you the right to speak for yourself. You have to judge for yourself whether it's the right time to speak or not. Usually I suggest that people who are especially talkative should try to speak a little less. For those who are especially quiet, sometimes it's also necessary to say a few words. Sometimes we talk about oral exams, but during oral exams you should say what needs to be said. However, some people, even during oral exams, really can't seem to even quite properly spit it out either, always stammering and stumbling over words, just full of ums and ahs all the time. Anyway, there are many things that some individuals cannot say or reveal at this particular moment in time. Maybe some of it is related to the karma of past lives, but some may due to the reason that their language was not cultivated. Therefore, language skills are important and need to be cultivated and practiced. Language is also very important in our world. It is, in fact, one of the most fundamentally important tools of human communication. Whether they are Easterners or Westerners, people universally rely on language to truly know what this person's heart and true intentions are like. What is this person's behavior like? Most people, and very many truly wise people, used to know nothing at all about this particular person, what he was really like. But after interacting with him for quite a significant period of time, eventually, a wise person can basically observe the depth of this person's wisdom truly astounds, whether or not he is kind-hearted, or in other words, this person's ability to get things done. Of course, there are a few individuals whose speech is particularly brilliant, but in reality, their actions may not match their words. Aside from these rare cases, most people rely on language to make judgments about a person's mind and actions. So when we speak in daily life, we should also observe ourselves with genuine awareness and mindfulness. Next, let's carefully analyze this situation a bit. When it comes to effectively dealing with people in general, some individuals are very high profile, while others prefer to remain quite low-key. Of course, when it comes to being a person, being very low-key and keeping a low profile is also very good. In this case, it's actually very good as well. But if you are too low-key and silent, no one will truly know about your profound inner wisdom. It's very much like a hidden spring quietly bubbling up with valuable insights just beneath the surface. However, if absolutely no one is ever made aware of its existence, if it remains completely concealed and unshared, then it ultimately serves no meaningful purpose at all. So what exactly should we as human beings truly learn to master in this complex world? the balance between expressing ourselves outwardly and keeping things reserved. Some truly great elders of the past, their spiritual attainments and profound insights were indeed remarkably profound, reaching extraordinary, even saintly, levels of deep realization and enlightened understanding. However, because they consistently preferred a life of quiet contemplation and serene tranquility, they often did not wish to reveal themselves outwardly. For this reason, very few people truly knew about the profound level of their spiritual practice throughout their entire lives. In the end, they might not have had a significant impact on those immediately around them either. On the other hand, if we overly flaunt ourselves and extensively promote ourselves everywhere, perhaps that is also entirely unnecessary and perhaps even counterproductive. But if you are consistently too low-key, excessively modest, overly reserved, and perpetually silent, then perhaps, even though deep within yourself, you are truly full of inherent merit and abundantly rich in profound knowledge, all of this valuable knowledge and wisdom that you have accumulated may remain unseen and unappreciated by others. It will be quite challenging and difficult to effectively influence those around you in a meaningful way. According to some profound Mahayana Buddhist teachings, it is indeed profoundly necessary, when the opportune time is truly right, to openly and generously share your accumulated inner merits in a very practical and honest way with those individuals who are genuinely receptive. And this is also very reasonable. Especially for us Easterners, this is particularly true and deeply felt. They often regard being low-key and modest as a highly cherished and profound virtue. Indeed, many of us Buddhists, when we speak and express ourselves, frequently say things like, "I am especially ignorant and truly lacking in understanding," or "I am a foolish disciple, I am wrong," and so on. For example, when it comes to giving a speech, we might say, "I actually didn't want to speak, but someone asked me to and I couldn't say no. I really had no choice. So now I'm especially feeling nervous, very distressed, and very upset. But there's nothing much I can really do, so I'll just say a few words. However, I have absolutely no confidence." I'm not familiar with this field and so on. We say a lot of overly modest things. It's the same in Tibetan area. Maybe it's like this in Han regions as well. But honestly, it's just a cultural habit we've all learned. Most people think, oh, this person isn't arrogant or showing off. This particular person is indeed very good. Wow, they're truly quite down to earth and genuinely humble. But in the West, if you say things like this, people might just laugh in the audience. If you're truly so inherently inferior and profoundly pessimistic, why would anyone even consider allowing you to come up here? They might speak with considerably more confidence about certain specific things. They might say, "This is how my field should be. I'm quite proficient and well-versed in this particular subject. I actually wanted to take this opportunity to share my own unique perspective with everyone here today." And quite suddenly, the entire atmosphere of the discussion becomes much more engaging and captivating. Many young people nowadays, they also really like to directly talk about their own significant merits. Otherwise, if no one introduces them, then they might not be recognized. For example, when someone casually introduces a person on the side, they might say, "Oh, his introduction just now was a bit too brief. Actually, he doesn't really understand my professional field and my specific expertise, but I do. Let me talk about the projects I've worked on. My current level of spiritual practice. He doesn't know, only I do. Now I can truly fly, and I can indeed even display quite supernatural powers. Sometimes they can talk just like this." In this way, modern people feel, wow, this person is so incredibly genuine, I should definitely rely on him. They have a great deal of confidence in him. However, these two approaches might both be rather extreme and perhaps even a bit rigid. If someone is overly modest, then perhaps many of us will find it quite hard to truly know much about him. Back then, the esteemed teacher of Atisha, when Maitrapada eventually came to Tibetan area, despite his greatness that he was an extraordinary pandita, but his trusted translator unfortunately died on the way. Later, after he arrived in Tibetan area, he himself was also quite low-key, and because of this, sometimes he worked as a dedicated servant, engaging in various tasks and duties. In fact, the poems he wrote were also exceptionally good, but he often worked as a laborer for a certain family. As a result, his efforts to spread the Dharma and benefit beings never really took off. He died in Tibet. Later, the Venerable Atisha discovered, through a deeply personal poem he had carefully written, that this remarkable individual was indeed his revered teacher. At that very moment, he wept profusely and said with great sorrow and profound emotion, "You Tibetans have such shallow merit. In India, both in the East and the West, there isn't a pandita as remarkable as Maitrapada. But after he arrived in Tibet, he didn't accomplish any work to spread the Dharma and benefit sentient beings. He passed away in this way, manifesting parinirvana. As mentioned in the preliminary practices, if a spiritual teacher does not turn the wheel of Dharma, it is of no benefit to sentient beings. It's the same situation. I often think this way myself. If our precious guru had been extremely low-key and always unwilling to meet with other people and had remained out of the public eye, perhaps his lineage as well, many of us who came later, would never have had the precious opportunity to meet such an extraordinary and enlightened guru. So sometimes our precious guru, despite their immense wisdom, remains remarkably low-key and incredibly humble. But at times he can also be quite high profile. Back in 1986, when we traveled to many diverse and captivating places throughout Tibetan area, there were about 20 or 30 sturdy vehicles in the convoy moving across the landscape. At that time, there weren't any major restrictions or significant limitations. We even used powerful loudspeakers, and the convoy was truly grand and impressively large. On the way, I saw many local Tibetans, some of whom were especially emotional, people who were very deeply moved and touched. And just by hearing the sound from the loudspeakers, they would immediately start to cry and prostrate themselves before others. Through this particular kind of behavior, sometimes it might indeed inspire a sense of faith in some people. But perhaps for a few particularly rational and discerning individuals, it might actually be quite off-putting. That possibility exists. But no matter what the specific circumstances, everyone's situation is truly different. Perhaps those with wisdom know when to be high profile and when to be low-key. If someone is consistently and excessively low-key and maintains an extremely humble demeanor, that might not necessarily be a truly beneficial or advantageous thing either. As dedicated practitioners, we should also carefully observe and thoughtfully consider this particular aspect, and consider what we should do at any given time, right? This is one aspect of the matter. Now let's transition and move forward to the next important point in our discussion as we delve deeper into the various aspects of this topic. Most people in the world generally have very clear and distinct understandings and differentiations between the powerful emotions of love and hate. If others truly hate me, I will certainly hate them back. If others genuinely love me, then I will also love them back. Then I will certainly treat them very well indeed too, of course. So, generally speaking, people across the world are often fiercely and unequivocally intolerant of evil. This, too, is undeniably a very good and positive thing. On one hand, according to worldly rules and common practices and accepted norms, this is considered good. But if you are excessively intolerant of evil, then often, within your own mind, you may develop a very strong sense of hatred for no reason at all. In that case, your actions and behavior will also end up harming many people, bringing suffering to everyone involved over extended time. So what does this ultimately lead to? It's like becoming a guard dog, which often results in offending many people, because some people have a bad temper, and on top of that, they deeply hate those individuals who are truly harmful to society or the evildoers within society, to the point of hating them to the core. As a result, they end up offending a lot of people. In Tibetan area, we have a saying that old dogs can only live about 9 years. They offend everyone in the world with their constant barking and aggressive territorial behavior. Because some households unfortunately have vicious dogs, they might potentially bite many innocent people and cause significant harm to a lot of them, but their own lives are very short. In such a remarkably short lifespan, they should be actively making good and meaningful connections with others. But that's not how truly vicious dogs behave. They only want to protect their own home, to protect their own lives, and to ensure their continued existence and well-being. And in doing so, they might inadvertently offend a great many people. In reality, this particular approach isn't very reasonable or practical, so it is advisable not to be quick to anger or become easily irritated. Furthermore, try not to get unduly upset over nothing of true significance. Don't frequently harbor feelings of anger and hatred. Some people, for example, when they see someone doing something truly bad to society, they might react in a certain way. They feel especially hateful toward them. If they hold a grudge against someone personally, they'll turn against that person and become enemies. Some people, though, aren't that extreme in their actions, but they still can't stand certain things. Of course, this might have something to do with some people's inner nature. It is still related. Some people are especially compassionate toward everyone. Even if other individuals inflict significant harm upon them, they still consistently treat every single person with complete equality. Or you could say they use a method of humbling themselves and valuing others more. They respond to others with love. Actually, from the profound perspective of Mahayana Buddhism, it is truly understood that this is indeed very good. When someone harms you for no reason, you treat them as a kind teacher. You regard them as your own parents. At least for the time being, people generally tend to think that this particular way of acting is indeed very weak and truly very cowardly. They might very well see it in that specific way. But in reality, in fact, just as Mencius once truly said, the benevolent have no enemies. A compassionate person has no enemies. In the whole world, each and every person is their friend. Actually, if we can truly and completely, with dedication, achieve what is taught in Mahayana Buddhism, or what the wise sages of the past truly accomplished, that the benevolent have absolutely no enemies. If we can genuinely strive to achieve this, it would indeed be truly wonderful. Just as the revered Bodhisattva Shantideva wisely said, actually, when someone harms you, it's not without reason. There may be karmic causes from past lives that are deeply involved in this situation. Or perhaps they are driven by their own afflictions, which manifest as deep-seated emotional suffering. They are not acting of their own free will. If we understand this, we should be very empathetic. For example, if someone harms me for no apparent reason, even though I treat them very extremely well, but they still yet harm me for no reason. According to worldly principles, if others don't offend me, I won't offend them in return. But if someone offends me, I must retaliate. That's probably how it is. But in reality, if we follow the Mahayana Buddhist perspective, if someone offends me, I would also consider it from many different angles. Perhaps it was truly caused by them being driven by their own personal afflictions. Maybe, I think to myself, I haven't actually done anything wrong at all. But in fact, I may have inadvertently caused them significant harm. If we truly try to understand it from many diverse perspectives, the anger in our own minds will also gradually disappear, and gradually we will also influence them positively. Actually, in our daily lives, we really should not fall into either extreme. This is what is called extremism. Sometimes we love someone intensely to the point where we can't help it, loving them as if our life depends on it. Other times we hate someone intensely, to the point where we absolutely cannot help it, feeling a deep and profound sense of resentment. It's always either, I have to kill you, or you have to kill me. Nowadays, many people in the world act in extremely radical and aggressive ways. In the past, there was a renowned novelist named Morgum, a truly influential figure. In some of his books, he mentioned our ordinary lives. This is a kind of simple greatness. Actually, people shouldn't be too swept away by temporary feelings that constantly and unpredictably rise and fall. Today I am so incredibly happy, truly dancing as if I am genuinely about to fly. Or, today I'm so miserable as if I want to burrow into the ground. In fact, both of these are actually extremes. In our lives, even if we really suffer, the suffering isn't actually that much. And even if we're happy, the happiness isn't that much either. If it's love, we can't love that much either. No matter what, in the end, it's still the suffering of separation from loved ones. If it's hate, no matter how much you hate, it's actually quite unnecessary as well. Therefore, many problems in our daily life are also discussed here, knowing the right measure. What I'm talking about today primarily concerns knowing the appropriate measure and not going to any extremes. If you fall into either extreme in anything you do, it brings significant suffering to yourself, causing internal distress, and brings even more profound suffering to others as well, impacting their well-being. This is a crucial aspect we also need to carefully observe and understand. Then there's what we usually call the right and delicate balance between softness and firmness, a nuanced approach. When it's time to be gentle, be a bit softer. When it's time to be firm, you really need to be a bit tougher. Usually when we speak, our language is very gentle and kind, and our hearts are especially kind. Of course, this is especially good. But in this particular era, many truly good people are often discriminated against, while many truly bad people are frequently admired by others. In such a challenging era, if you are too kind and inherently weak, people will look down on you with particular discrimination and contempt. This is a real possibility. So in different situations, we must maintain the right balance between softness and firmness. We certainly cannot be too soft, but we also absolutely cannot be too hard. So as I was saying now, If we were to be excessively tough or overly stringent at any given time, it might not be particularly suitable or appropriate in this current era either, considering the prevailing circumstances. Some people are especially tough. We call them hardliners, and sometimes because some things simply cannot be solved just by being tough, they need to learn flexibility and compromise to achieve better outcomes. And sometimes, if you are truly too weak and utterly powerless, you might also be significantly looked down upon by others. If you are indeed too weak, people might not even truly see you as a complete person. Some dedicated practitioners and devout monastics think, "I'm someone who has generated bodhicitta. I should be kind." They don't care what others say about them. But if you act like this in today's world, you'll definitely be trampled on by everyone. They'll step on your head and walk all over you. In this case, whether it's spreading the Dharma and benefiting beings, or truly accomplishing the essential things you genuinely need to do, you simply won't succeed. So in the realm of spiritual practice, on one hand, your heart can indeed be wonderfully gentle and profoundly soft. But on the other hand, you absolutely cannot be overly weak and entirely submissive. If you are, that's also unreasonable. Just like it says in the Shuimu Maxims, if you are overly gentle in the wrong place, in this degenerate world, you will be bullied by everyone. Everyone will say you are as soft as cotton, so why wouldn't they use you as a cushion? This truly means that if we are excessively submissive, people will inevitably look down upon you and ruthlessly trample on you. We often observe this phenomenon happening in various situations. For example, sometimes when we have meetings, some people speak in such a soft and feeble way, as if they're about to fall asleep at any moment. After they finish speaking, no one pays any attention to them. It's obvious that this person lacks power. But then there are others who are overly forceful, who, as soon as they open their mouths, start raging and shouting. In that particular case, everyone finds them rather unpleasant and quite disagreeable too. So, when you speak, even gentleness truly needs to have its appropriate limits. And being forceful also has its boundaries. Just like we mentioned earlier, if you are too compliant and gentle, it's like cotton in our everyday life, because it's too soft. Everyone just uses it as a comfortable cushion. No one would ever put it in a place of honor or respect. This is also something our predecessors and great masters have said. From a Buddhist perspective, it is often understood that not everything should be perceived as being too soft or excessively fragile. Some individuals might then inquire, saying, "Aren't you, as a practitioner, supposed to have generated bodhicitta? You are supposed to be servants of all sentient beings, so why? Whatever we say, you should just listen." But if things were truly like that and we just kept our heads down and diligently walked our own individual path, we might not even be given that necessary space. Especially in this modern day and age, there are truly times when we must say what needs to be said and do what truly needs to be done. There are also important things that we should fight for, and we should fight for them with conviction. As Buddhists, there is a clear difference between practicing the exchange of self and others and simply being overly weak. There is indeed a distinction between the two. In the two codes of conduct teachings, for example, it talks a lot about those individuals who are truly negligent. If someone is excessively negligent, then it appears they possess neither the profound virtues of spiritual transcendence, nor even the fundamental basic decency and moral integrity expected of ordinary worldly people. In that particular case, they simply cannot accomplish anything at all. So Buddhists should also, in accordance with their true and authentic principles, diligently follow certain established worldly rules when handling various matters. This is indeed a very necessary point to consider. So what exactly is this statement talking about, and what does it truly signify? It profoundly means that when it comes to situations requiring us to choose between being soft or being tough, we should not become overly soft in our approach. Otherwise, we may be looked down upon by others. In the end, we might truly become especially vulnerable and marginalized in our communities, limited in our opportunities to grow. Especially in this day and age, people always look at whether someone has influence or ability, whether they truly possess significant strength and demonstrable capabilities in these particular areas. If they observe that you do not, then people simply won't take you seriously at all, and they will not respect your opinions. So in this regard, it's also necessary to maintain a balanced and dignified presence. Sometimes, even for us Buddhists, if we are too weak, we really do face all kinds of discrimination from others in today's challenging social environment requiring both wisdom and strength. That's really important. When it is necessary, we should make use of our own resources and capabilities, as well as abilities, wisdom, or unique qualities. This is really very important. Otherwise, especially for Buddhists, since Buddhist tradition is deeply rooted in boundless compassion, this stands in stark contrast to some other non-religious groups or even various other religions that may not emphasize this particular aspect as centrally. They possess their own distinct kind of assertiveness. Because of this inherent assertiveness, absolutely no one would ever dare to bully them. Many of us say, I am a Buddhist. It doesn't matter if others provoke me. But if you think like this, then for sure many people will try to destroy, suppress, or exclude you. This will happen. So generally speaking, we need to find balance between compassion and strength. As long as we do not abandon bodhicitta or sentient beings, it is absolutely necessary when it is appropriate to display our own inherent strength. This practice is also explicitly permitted by the Buddha himself. In the past, we have also consistently cited substantial scriptural evidence from various sacred teachings. Therefore, everyone should endeavor to remember this particular point quite clearly and distinctly. Next, let us now delve into the significant topic of worldly wealth. Is it truly reasonable and ethically sound to actively pursue and accumulate money? Generally speaking, if one is not greedy for wealth and is content with little desire, that's very good. However, in our current era, if you genuinely do not have even a single penny to your name and live like a complete beggar, everyone will unfortunately treat you with significant discrimination, profound contempt, and utter abandonment. That's precisely how it is. Because in this era, not to mention wealthy people, even the dogs of rich families are greatly admired and treated as truly honored guests by people. This is indeed the kind of remarkable era in which we currently live. So at times like this, when necessary, it's truly important to accumulate some wealth appropriately and responsibly. This is also very significant. According to some prevalent views within Theravada Buddhism, it is indeed widely advocated to be content with very little and to live simply with few material desires and attachments. Wealth is considered the root of all misfortune, and many of its faults are discussed. However, when it truly comes to the profound Mahayana Sutras and the extensive treatises, it is a different matter. If in certain situations it benefits sentient beings, then, for a bodhisattva, for someone who has truly and sincerely generated bodhicitta, it is indeed quite necessary to earn money. I distinctly recall seeing in the Yogacarabhumi Shastra that it explicitly states, if bodhisattvas seek worldly skills and knowledge and are able to accumulate great wealth with relatively little effort, it should be solely and entirely for the ultimate benefit of all sentient beings. This means, if bodhisattvas pursue worldly craftsmanship and knowledge, and seek these worldly professions, when they are actively learning these essential skills, if it truly doesn't require a great deal of significant effort and only takes a relatively small amount of time and energy, then it is absolutely necessary to make a substantial amount of money, not for one's own personal benefit, but rather for the benefit of all sentient beings. It's not like what some people say nowadays, where all these resources are controlled by oneself, and one just keeps making money. When they make money, they never think about the whole society or about sentient beings at all. Actually, some of the Confucian ideas in the East nowadays are overly focused on oneself, without balancing personal growth with community well-being. I've met many highly successful people in my life, and they often frequently talk about making money. But when they talk about making money, their goals are very narrow, just limited to the people immediately around them. Other than that, their aspirations are quite restricted. It seems that they do not really possess a particularly extensive or profound motivation. In fact, it is indeed very much essential and truly necessary for us to diligently accumulate a substantial amount of wealth, and subsequently, after carefully and thoughtfully accumulating this wealth, to then genuinely benefit all sentient beings. This is also a very good and beneficial thing. If you are completely penniless, much like a beggar, especially in this modern era, it is truly and genuinely hard to get by. It's inconvenient to do anything as well. Therefore, when truly necessary, as a great and compassionate bodhisattva, of course, as a dedicated monastic, one mainly focuses on accumulating spiritual wealth and giving these things away. Just as explained in the Entering the Middle Way treatise, there is no requirement to make money. But for lay people, many Buddhists, they give up all their efforts to make money and use a little money for life release. Then they live like beggars themselves in utter poverty and destitution. and their families look down on them. Their friends look down on them too. They go everywhere borrowing money everywhere. And in the end, they may find it very difficult for themselves, let alone practicing or studying Buddhism. Even surviving becomes hard. When one first develops renunciation, if you abandon everything all at once, that may not be reasonable either. Because after a while, your sense of renunciation may completely disappear, and at that point you have neither renunciation nor money, nor any friends or family left. You used to have everything, but now you have nothing at all. In this way, you will truly end up being especially pitiful indeed in the world. So before you reach such a state, you should also accumulate some wealth appropriately, and you should also make suitable offerings and acts of charity. Actually, from the perspective of both spiritual development and worldly responsibilities, when it comes to making offerings and giving to others, if you mainly focus on giving the Dharma, on Dharma offerings, that might be more suitable and appropriate. This is the specific section that I really wanted to talk about in detail. Next, let's talk about how, in our world, accumulating wealth should also be done in a proper way, following both ancient wisdom traditions and modern ethical considerations. For many capable people, regardless of whether or how you have ability or not, in the process of doing business, if you often shortchange others and demonstrate a significant lack of integrity in your dealings, then for the business person themselves and for the entire country, this behavior has profound and far-reaching implications. There will be absolutely no peace. Moreover, some individuals, in their relentless pursuit of truly huge profits, their entire way of doing business is very improper and unreasonable. In this case, it may bring harm to both themselves and others, causing a lot of disadvantages for everyone. Therefore, a gentleman should diligently accumulate wealth through entirely proper and ethical means. It is essential that one accumulates financial resources in a morally upright and conscientious manner. This is very important. Just as it is truly stated in the Chinese classic, The Great Learning, virtue is the root and wealth is merely the branch. This profound ancient wisdom signifies that if we are to engage in business, the cultivation of virtue and the development of strong moral character are of paramount importance. Indeed, character serves as the fundamental bedrock upon which all sustainable success is built. If, however, we solely concentrate our efforts on the accumulation of material wealth, that is not truly the fundamental root. Otherwise, we are truly abandoning the fundamental for the superficial. In the end, what we truly need and desire may not be obtained, and we will be left wanting, while what we do not need might be acquired instead. Therefore, when you are accumulating wealth, try your absolute best not to engage in extremely unreasonable or even unethical financial practices or schemes or actions that go against the law of cause and effect. You should act in a proper and lawful manner. Whether it is in business, industry, or agriculture, this is also permitted by the Buddha. In fact, as we have previously mentioned, just like what is clearly stated in the revered The Buddha's Advice to Sigalaka, Buddhism praises all these various fields, including the sectors of industry and agriculture. However, it is important to note that the Buddha does not permit certain actions or practices, the unnecessary accumulation of wealth, or methods of accumulating wealth that excessively violate the law of cause and effect. Such ways of accumulating wealth are unreasonable. Therefore, when we generally accumulate wealth, it is still important to follow reason and abide by rules. This is very important. Some people are excessively greedy for wealth, working desperately to make money, and spend their whole lives like this. They never truly consider the overall quality of their own lives. For example, in some places, including Thailand and the nation of Myanmar, the people there are not very wealthy, but they still pay significant attention to the quality of their daily lives and well-being. When they have earned a certain amount of money, they typically take a well-deserved break in the winter. Especially Europeans, after diligently earning some money, they often take a good amount of time off to truly enjoy themselves. It's certainly not like in some of our places, where such extended breaks are less common. People spend their whole lives desperately earning, and in the end they end up in the hospital receiving a notice of late-stage cancer or a critical illness notice. At that point, I remember one day when I was in Chongqing, there was a businessman. He told me, he said, he had worked extremely hard to make money all his life. And in the end, he was already about 60 years old. When he got cancer, he suddenly realized, wow, he hadn't even spent all of his money, and he felt truly sad and deeply regretful. But there was nothing he could do. His body just couldn't take it anymore. It was extremely painful. All the money he earned, apart from paying for his own medical treatment, he never got to enjoy the rest of it, not even once in his whole life. Living like that really isn't good at all, so we shouldn't go overboard. We should truly strive hard for a good life. That's indeed very important. However, we also shouldn't be overly obsessed with constantly talking about money all the time. This is truly quite frightening. In the past, the esteemed Sima Qian also mentioned in his profound records of the grand historian that the very root of chaos and disaster is actually money. When everyone talks about profit, the world is in danger. If everyone is just saying money, 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 then the world will fall into great chaos. But that's a little bit dangerous. Right now, a lot of people really are actually like this, at this moment in time. Except for a very few, a small number of practitioners in society, whether I interact with civil servants, doctors, teachers, or business people, it's always especially about the pervasive influence of money. You see, in the Western world, many people also place a great deal of importance on financial matters. When it truly comes to the subject of money, it seems that everything else becomes negotiable. The very moment money is mentioned, people's attitudes truly change, their tone completely changes, and the whole person transforms. No matter how good the relationship is or how deep the feelings are, as soon as money is involved, people become especially sensitive. Actually, in this world, some of the money we might actually use, some of the money isn't ours. So we ourselves really should follow the saying, "A gentleman loves wealth, but acquires it in the right way." This truly makes a lot of sense. It's more reasonable to gradually accumulate wealth in a sustainable way. Next, let's discuss being proficient at managing finances effectively. This is also a very good thing, but if we become habitually and excessively stingy, truly and utterly miserly, then even our close friends and family members may have already distanced themselves from us, stopped caring about us. We end up like a demon guarding a treasure. In the end, you'll be left completely alone, with absolutely no one to truly help you. Therefore, while we are diligently accumulating our wealth, we should also be very good at handling what exactly? We should be exceptionally good at giving, at generously donating our wealth. As we accumulate, when the time is right, we must know how to handle it wisely and effectively. For example, from your regular monthly or annual yearly income, set aside a certain percentage or a certain per mille, use part of it for offerings and charitable giving, and do some charity work. This is all very good, otherwise, truly, when the end comes, some people may have already turned into misers. In the past, in the scholars, which we learned when we were students. Our teacher especially liked to talk about the cases from the scholars, although it seemed like this wasn't actually in the curriculum at the time. There was another character who was especially stingy. When he eventually passed away, he had only 2 lamp wicks remaining. And he couldn't die in peace, with profound regret and attachment. That's how the story went. Sadly, maybe in real life today, this could certainly and really happen. So there's really no need to be so extremely stingy. Being overly wasteful, excessively luxurious, or extravagant isn't good either. So when it comes to thrift and extravagance, we really shouldn't go to either extreme. When it's time to truly enjoy something, you should definitely enjoy it. When it's truly the appropriate time to give, you should wholeheartedly give. Everyone should cultivate their own understanding of wealth and manage it in a responsible manner. This thoughtful approach to wealth is also a good thing. Next, let's delve into a discussion about the valuable friends we make. If you have even more friends, then your social relationships will get better and better. That's also a very good thing. However, if we have more and more friends, among your friends, it is possible that some individuals may unfortunately possess a truly bad character, and indeed they can very easily lead you astray from the right path. In the end, this can ruin both yourself and others. Just like many of us, in the end, both parties fall into the river of wrong views together, unable to extricate themselves. It's truly frightening. So when we make friends or spiritual companions, most importantly, we must be very careful and cautious. Honestly speaking, don't become close friends with someone without taking adequate time before you really get to know them thoroughly. Sometimes, due to our past life karmic connections, you might be especially enthusiastic at the beginning, but in the very end, it could potentially turn into all kinds of complex entanglements. Such relationships exist because of karmic ties, but sometimes it may be caused by one's own lack of wisdom. Just like nowadays, including some people who are unfortunately involved with issues such as AIDS, drug use, alcoholism, or gambling, most of these individuals end up this way primarily because they are not good at carefully choosing their friends. This is the reason that leads to both themselves and others being ruined in the end. At that point, it may be too late for regret. So when you first start making friends, It's not like how people in the world nowadays have a defensive and hostile attitude toward everyone. That might not be right either. But it's also not right to be completely sincere with everyone, especially for those who have just graduated from school, students who truly lack sufficient social experience and interaction. They are especially prone to trusting others easily. At this time, if we are not careful, indeed in the world, we only realize in the end, wow, so this was actually a bad friend. The Yoga Karabhumi Shastra mentions 5 types of bad friends. One is a person truly without a sense of shame or remorse. Another is someone who holds a deep wrong views. Another is someone who is especially lazy. Another is someone who behaves badly. And another is called a cowardly and inferior person, timid and lowly. This type of cowardly person is especially timid. They may seem timid, weak, and powerless on the surface, but when they truly want to harm you, they are actually quite capable and effective. Back during the Cultural Revolution, some disciples around the masters were especially weak and powerless. Normally they seemed very, very nice. But once they stood up, they could actually be quite fierce. Among the disciples of His Holiness Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche, there were also such cases. Some of them, in fact, couldn't even walk steadily for most of the time, struggling to maintain their balance. If there was no one to support them, they might collapse at any moment. But when they set out to do something bad, they could be even more formidable than the strongest people. There are such people, so it's wise to keep boundaries. Of course, some of us might actually have the inherent ability to be on guard well in advance and be prepared, while others, due to karmic circumstances, only realize it in the end. This is quite possible in any case, however. In this world of ours, as we know it, if we don't choose our friends well, it could lead to many problems. This is also something we should pay attention to, especially in our work, family, and social interactions. The consequences can sometimes be long-lasting indeed. Let me mention 1 or 2 more things. If we can manage our emotions in a healthy and positive way, consistently and with conscious daily effort, that we remain unmoved without joy or sorrow, that would of course be excellent. Although we may not be able to reach such a state of being unmoved and free from joy or sorrow, we can gradually improve ourselves step by step. We can apply these principles in daily life. But if you are feeling too moody and quite unpredictable in your overall demeanor, you will also be despised and looked down upon by others. So we should maintain our state of mind in daily life, no matter what difficulties or challenges we may encounter together. Emotions need to be stable. Otherwise, even your closest friends and family members may have absolutely no other choice but to reluctantly leave you behind. As we mentioned earlier, when we talked about the 7 points of mind training, actually, the 7 points of mind training, if you can truly memorize it, that's absolutely great. It will really help to improve your behavior. Sometimes, though the text isn't long, we need to emphasize. Especially when it comes to emotions. Some people are moody, irritable, and quick-tempered. These things are actually quite frightening for us as people. They really are especially scary. People who are easily prone to anger, who are especially prone to experiencing feelings of inferiority, these tendencies can indeed cause tremendous trouble throughout their entire lives. Most of the time, as I have repeatedly stated before, I also observe people's emotions very carefully and with great attentiveness. During the process of observation, I found that some people really can't help but get angry. There are such cases, but there are others who, because they are overly sensitive, overly fragile, with a very vulnerable glass heart, for this very reason, in the end, they simply cannot control their very own emotions. For example, in Africa, there's something quite fascinating called the wild horse effect. What exactly does that mean? There is a kind of wild horse that truly can't stand being bitten by even small, annoying mosquitoes. Once it gets bitten, it really starts to itch. It becomes extremely agitated and intensely angry. In the end, it gets so worked up that it tragically dies from its own overwhelming rage. We can clearly see the wild horse possesses such a truly huge and powerful body, but just a single mosquito bite on its body is something it could easily handle. But it becomes obsessed with this issue. Some of us are really like that too. Maybe it's just a single sentence. Or maybe it's just a small matter, something that wasn't that serious to begin with, but to that person, it feels like a huge deal. Sometimes it's even just a misunderstanding. Not long ago, there was a story in the news where a wife was about to bring her husband a meal, and there was a woman at her husband's workplace who was holding an umbrella in the rain and went inside. Then she didn't even argue with him directly. She took a sharp, gleaming knife and was about to commit suicide, planning to desperately jump into the river. Later, she was fortunately rescued from the brink. When concerned people gently asked her about the harrowing incident, she tearfully said, "I've treated him so incredibly, exceptionally well, but he actually just really walked in with another woman, indeed. So what's the point of me living in this world?" This is actually quite understandable. A lot of people nowadays really do have this kind of wild horse effect. For most ordinary people, for normal individuals, it really shouldn't be a very big deal at all. In fact, it's quite manageable. But from the perspective of his emotions, from his personal point of view, this truly is a very huge and very significant matter. This is also a valuable lesson for us. We shouldn't let ourselves be overly swayed by joy, anger, sorrow, or grief. Otherwise, we might truly ruin our very own future, and indeed, even our present and future lives could be completely destroyed because of it. So many of us should profoundly understand that what is commonly referred to as spiritual practice is, in its essence, just like this. What does spiritual practice mean in Buddhism? It's about taking reasonable principles and reflecting on them repeatedly. When we talk about whether spiritual practice is good or not, it doesn't mean you have to meditate or meditate for a certain length of time. Wow, he can sit for 3 hours without moving at all. You can't just say their spiritual practice is excellent because of that. They may remain still, but if they become irritable and angry right after meditating, then their practice might not be that good, right? We might think, he really can sit for 3 hours without even a single hair moving. If you put hair on his nostrils, it wouldn't move. It's as if you can't even tell whether he's dead or alive. But when he comes out of meditation, if his temper is worse than anyone else's, then it's hard to say whether his spiritual practice is actually good, right? I think that for many of us in our real everyday lives, in our daily routines, especially in movies and television, they leave us with all kinds of profound emotional influences, deeply affecting our cherished relationships with close friends, beloved family members, and dearest loved ones, and extending far beyond what our hearts can normally comfortably handle. There is a kind of very fragile force. Modern media has already bestowed this upon us. Everyone has this weakness. If you really don't pay very much attention to it, just today, some entrepreneurs actually asked me to give a teaching. I said, there's not much to teach. The very best thing is for you to fully and completely understand your own mind. If you can truly understand it thoroughly, then in reality, nothing in this world is such a big deal. There's nothing truly worth being excessively worried about or diligently chasing after too much in life at any given moment. If you can recognize your own state of mind, then perhaps that is truly the very best kind of teaching, quite simply indeed. Next, let's talk about the topic of trust. If we secretly plot against or harm those close friends and relatives who trust us deeply and rely on us, then this kind of behavior, scheming against them in the dark, is really completely unreasonable and unacceptable. It's just like some stray dogs in the world. They simply cannot discern what is good from what is bad, no matter how others choose to treat them. For example, if you throw stones at it, it might not even truly realize it. And if you were to give it a generous lump of meat, it doesn't feel any sense of gratitude either, just like a hungry stray dog. People like this should truly be considered utterly shameless, because it is certainly not easy for other individuals to place such deep trust and confidence in you. But you don't value it at all. You harm and deceive others for no reason at all. In our world, such people are called those without a sense of shame or guilt. So what kind of person should we strive to be? Someone who knows shame and guilt, someone who is trustworthy and reliable. This is indeed very important, both in the profound teachings of Buddhism and in the philosophical traditions of Western thought. Of course, sometimes to fully achieve this 100%, to act completely in accordance with reason and truth, is also quite difficult. But at the very least, towards those who genuinely rely on and truly trust us, there is absolutely no need to intentionally cause them any harm. This is also a basic standard of conduct in Buddhism. Even in the secular world, this is extremely important and highly valued. Otherwise, if our character is especially quite poor, we might end up hurting our family members around us, and those individuals who consistently trust us on a very regular basis. Nowadays, there's a saying called betraying those closest to you. It means harming the people you know best. We also have a very important saying in Tibet, a proverb that guides us, which means that a thief within the family unit is often quite hard for family members to readily detect. A neighbor who is a thief is hard for the family dog to notice, because the family's loyal watchdog is very familiar with all the surrounding neighbors. So when a neighbor comes to stealthily steal something valuable, the family dog cannot detect it either. If there is a cunning thief within our own family, then no one can detect it. because family members are always together. If the person closest to you, the one you love most, the one you trust most, ends up hurting you, you might only realize it after you've been deeply hurt. Oh, so this is what this person is really like. Reflecting on the period before that, it was incredibly hard to notice. The profound truth is, for those who trust us, we should devotedly protect the precious trust that connects us all. This is undoubtedly also a very important teaching in our world. There are a few more significant points to consider. One crucial aspect is, how can we consistently maintain integrity both internally and externally, whether we are in front of others or behind their backs? If some individuals tend to flatter, excessively praise and fawn over you directly to your face, but then constantly gossip about and criticize your various faults behind your back, and do so often, saying one thing directly to someone's face and then completely another behind their back, it's truly like having a mouth with two distinct tongues. Just as a venomous snake can possess both a dark black tongue and a light white tongue within its mouth. This kind of deceptive behavior is actually quite unreasonable and fundamentally illogical. Saying one thing in front of people and another behind their backs, like walking a tightrope of lies, as we often say, a basin of fire in the open, a knife in the dark. Time has shown that sooner or later, without any doubt whatsoever, such a person's true heart will likely be discovered. In fact, this is very unreasonable and quite illogical. We should always strive to be consistent, both internally and externally. Just like we've talked about before, time reveals a person's heart, and a long road tests a horse's strength. People who love to flatter you to your face are very likely, behind your back, to be spreading rumors and slandering you. That's a real possibility. If someone doesn't flatter you to your face, maybe they genuinely won't do so behind your back either. So some people on the surface will often say things like, you are truly so great, you are absolutely amazing indeed. But as soon as you actually leave, they'll immediately say, that person is really quite bad, this and that. They're very quick to talk like that, you know. This kind of behavior is actually not very good. If you don't dare to speak badly about someone to their face, then try not to say it behind their back either. If you do say it through subtle but lasting ways, like poison to the soul, it could really affect your own character. And in many significant ways, it diminishes your personal integrity. So it becomes absolutely essential for us to notice and observe these subtle yet impactful things. And then in the ongoing process of doing various tasks, it's often observed that some individuals tend to agree very readily and without much hesitation. But in reality, as we navigate through life's complex relationships, people who truly keep their word are quite rare. And some people, the more readily they agree, the more likely they are to forget about it and not follow through. Time and experience have shown that in that case, it's really difficult. The point is, don't put too much trust in people who make promises too easily. Some people make promises very casually, saying, oh, no problem, no problem. You say, it's fine. They say, I'll do it, no problem. If someone makes promises this easily, I always have my serious doubts about that. They say, whatever you say, I'll do exactly as you ask, no problem. For me, that's an especially simple thing to do. Oh, it's nothing, it's nothing. You just go ahead and say it. As long as you ask, I'll get it done. If someone talks like this from their words alone, I would also doubt. But then there are also people who are especially troublesome. They have a defensive attitude about everything. They say, no, I can't do it, I can't do it. If that's the case, I don't really trust people at either extreme. If nothing is truly right and absolutely everything is wrong, then I find it difficult to fully align with such a perspective. I often think, even if you weren't here, the world would keep turning just the same, so it doesn't really matter. Maybe we would actually lose out on some of your truly unique and incredibly valuable talents. But aside from that, what's the big deal? Because for some people, even if you beg them, it's still really, really hard. And then there are people who are just too easygoing. If they're too easygoing, is it really that simple? Is it truly that easy? Sometimes that's genuinely the case. What we're talking about today is knowing precisely how to strike the right and appropriate balance. No matter what it is, it's crucial to find that perfect equilibrium. If you agree too readily, there will be some problems too. The more you agree to, the more likely it is that you end up doing things wrong. You take on this and you take on that, but in the end you accomplish nothing. If you take on everything, that's what happens. But for some people, nothing works for them, nothing is acceptable. That might not be reasonable either. So it's knowing how to strike balance. The main thing we're talking about is to know how to strike the right balance. So how exactly do we master this sense of proportion? It also inherently requires wisdom. Without wisdom, it's actually quite difficult. It says here that in the actual process of doing things, some people have a lot on their minds, As a direct result of this, they often make a great deal of promises, and then their trivial matters just keep piling up and up. When trivial matters keep increasing, it becomes very hard for them to see things through from start to finish. If you can't see things through, it actually harms yourself, and it also harms others. So we shouldn't have too many thoughts or too many trivial matters. As we navigate through life's daily challenges and responsibilities, having too many trivial matters really isn't a good thing. It's just like what's said in the letter to a friend. It means that a wise person doesn't make promises easily. But once they do indeed make a solemn promise, it's truly like words deeply carved in enduring stone. They would absolutely never go back on it, even if it were to cost them their very life. That's precisely how it is. For many important things, we should strive to be exactly like this. Otherwise, if you make too many promises and have too many thoughts, I want to do this thing and I also want to do that thing. Especially now in the internet age, we see a lot and hear a lot. Many people have too many irons in the fire. They want to do a bit of this here and a bit of that there, but in the end they accomplish nothing. There's no spirit of craftsmanship. In the past, people were always very focused on whatever they did. But nowadays, many people just do a little bit here and a little bit there. It's a bit unfocused. But for some things, due to circumstances, we're forced to do them, and there's nothing we can do. Especially now, some people who have been laid off, those who can't find a job, might work here for a while, but if it really doesn't work out or they're not satisfied, then they'll go work somewhere else for a while too. Because our era is changing so quickly, it's very hard to survive in the spaces we carve out for ourselves, and it's hard to adapt to ourselves. Plus, each of us has pretty high expectations. Sometimes when I see so many people in society who can't find work, when they go out looking for jobs, honestly, sometimes in my heart, I really do feel quite worried. Looking at just how fast society is changing, it's quite concerning. It's not like before. In the past, workers were just workers and farmers were just farmers. Whatever you did, you would stay in the position you found for yourself, and maybe you'd stay that way forever. But now it's not like that. Today I might work here for a while, but in the end, maybe there will be layoffs and they won't want me anymore. Maybe there's nothing I can do about it, so I have to go work somewhere else. Some of us change jobs more than a dozen times in a single year. I've met people like that in society. One moment they're here, the next moment, oh, this place pays 1,000 yuan a month. That place pays 20,000 yuan. Sometimes it's high, sometimes it's low. It's just like an EKG, truly unstable and highly erratic, much like a fluctuating heart monitor. This is also one of the many significant insecurities that our modern society brings to nearly everyone. Sometimes in these moments, you just truly don't know what to do or how to proceed. Maybe it also has something to do with a person's karma or merits. But it also has to do with one's own wisdom. Plus, our environment and the current situation also bring a lot of insecurity. Why are people so desperate to make money these days, just making money non-stop? They keep on saving, saving, saving. But in the very end, after all that diligent saving, it could all potentially be gone. It's entirely possible. I'm certainly not trying to scare you at all. The last one we'll talk about, and it's a significant point, is praise and blame. Praise and criticism. When you receive a lot of respect from others, you need to keep yourself in check and not become arrogant. When you find yourself excluded or even outright rejected by many people, it is essential that you strive to remain strong and independent. You must not allow these challenging experiences to make you feel utterly dejected or plunge you into a state of deep and profound misery. There's a verse from Sakya Pandita that I often quote. Not rejoicing because of praise, nor grieving because of insults, one who skillfully maintains their own virtue, this is the mark of a true person. We've talked about this before, haven't we? Don't think that when others praise you, wow, you're already floating high in the sky and can't come down, dancing through clouds with pure blissful energy and feeling incredibly confident and happy with your face so brilliantly glowing, beaming with all the heavenly joy and delight in the world. But as soon as you encounter a little setback, you become dejected, unable to pull yourself together and lose all motivation. You just keep crying and feeling heartbroken. If that's the case, then it doesn't really mean much. In this human world, things are indeed sometimes like a dream or an illusion. Anyway, if you have virtue, it doesn't matter whether others praise you or not. If you don't have any virtue, it's like being a vicious dog. And even if others say, wow, you're a great lion, it still doesn't do you any good. But if you are truly a lion, and others say you are no different from a vicious dog, it doesn't matter either. So we should When you are faced with challenging situations or when you encounter particularly difficult setbacks, you should strive to be firm and resilient, demonstrating unwavering strength and steadfastness. And similarly, when you receive praise from others, you should endeavor to remain calm, maintaining a balanced and humble perspective. I think I once actually wrote about this particular topic on my Weibo account, that when we conduct ourselves in our affairs, we should always pay careful attention to this crucial sense of proportion. This is very important. In short, it's generally best for you not to completely hand over your personal reins or control to someone else. You should always maintain your own significant autonomy and independent decision-making capabilities. When it comes to how you conduct yourself, and it's best to have your own way of making choices through wisdom, experience, and careful personal reflection. That would be ideal. Today, we've basically discussed these principles. All right, we'll stop here for today.
Bandara Banma Sodargye.